like listening. You're on point tonight. Everybody's awake. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is our first Chautauqua back from COVID. I think that deserves a huge round of applause. And we were able to get over that and come back in person. And thank you so much for joining us for the Chautauqua Josephine Baker. I think it's going to be just a wonderful program this evening. My name is Nick Potter, and I'm the Director of Community Relations and Development for the Pueblo City County Library District. And this program tonight is part of our February programming, where we have a huge effort and a huge celebration on Black History Month. So those of you, and I'm looking around the crowd, and it's so nice to see so many regulars that came to all of our in-person events before COVID, and you were the first in line to come back to our in-person events after COVID, so thank you for being here. But those of you in the crowd know how many programs we do in the library district throughout the district, throughout Pueblo County. So how many of you guys think that it's under 100? No? How many think it's under 200? Yeah? Under 300? So it's a little bit under it's a little bit over, 300 programs just for this month.
Wow. Just this month?
Just this month. And so this is just one of the very powerful educational, information gathering programs that we provide our community. And it's a great one. In addition to this program, I also want to give a plug for a program that we have that's called The Dry. That's going to be held in collaboration with El Pueblo History Museum and History Colorado. It's a flyer that we have up by the cookies. That's where you guys can recognize where they're from. That looks like this, and it's about an agricultural community, an African-American agricultural community that was created south of Manzanola in the 19-teens. We actually have one of the living survivors that will be coming to talk about that experience and what it was like starting the community, what it was like, and what it is like currently living in that community. So we have a really great lineup of programs for Black History Month. And if you want to see all of those programs, feel free to grab a program guide up at the front, also by the cookies. And you can see everything that we have going on at the library district throughout February. So in addition to our February programs, I also wanted to point out one more flyer that we had, and it's a Chautauqua. So if you're a Chautauqua fan, we have a great program that will be coming up for Women's History Month in March. And this is a Chautauqua for Mary Shelley that will be back here at PCC. So we hope to see you for all of our events that we have here at PCC. Maybe not all 200, or not all 300 plus. That might be a little much to ask, but as many as you can possibly attend. In addition to this program, as I said, the Mary Shelley program is going to be held here at PCC. And I want to give a huge thanks to Pueblo Community College, the Pueblo Community College Library for partnering with us, Chris McGrath, the director of the library. Thank you so much for hosting us. All right, and to introduce our presenter, I'm going to pass the microphone off, but this program wouldn't be possible without a partnership with the Colorado Humanities. And so tonight, Jennifer Macias from the Colorado Humanities is here. I'd love to give her a warm round of applause and a thanks for providing this program and helping us to bring it here to Pueblo, Colorado. Jennifer?
Thank you guys so much. My name is Jennifer Macias. I'm the History Programs Coordinator with Colorado Humanities. Colorado Humanities is a nonprofit organization affiliated and funded by the NEH. Every state has a Humanities Council, and Colorado is really fortunate to be able to offer so many different programs as part of what we do here throughout the state. One of the best parts is Black History Live. So this is the first of 11 performances that Becky will be doing over the next 2 weeks. She is an incredibly talented scholar, and I think that you guys are really going to enjoy her performance. When you were walking in, I handed you a little evaluation. If you have a chance to fill it out, please let us know not just about this performance, but other things that you're interested in. We also have an email listserv that goes out about once every 2 weeks, sometimes once a month. If you'd like to sign up to find out about other things that are happening in or around the area, please feel free to do so. Additionally, I've run out of hands, but This flyer I've also put out there for you. Pop Culture Classroom, which is also based out of Denver, is offering a free comic to everybody this month. It's a very interesting organization that is creating comics around historical topics. And this month's topic is around the Harlem Renaissance, which is when Josephine Baker kind of came into shining and prominence. In terms of thinking about if you haven't been to a Chautauqua performance before, Becky will first come out and do her presentation, and then she will take Q&A as Josephine Baker first. So you can ask questions to Josephine Baker about her childhood, maybe what her favorite country might have been that she had gone through, and Josephine will answer back in character. Then afterwards, Becky will let you know that he has switched over to herself as Becky Stone, and she will answer questions that you all have for her. If you have any questions about the performance or again anything else that Colorado Humanities does, please feel free to check out our website or come find me afterwards. Just to give you a little bit of context for Josephine's presentation, Josephine was born in the 1900s, a time period when women, and particularly women of color, struggled to find their place in a more modern America. She became known across the world as a comedian, a dancer, and eventually the first Black woman to star in a major motion picture in the 1920s. So without further ado, thank you all and welcome Josephine Baker.
Good evening. It's so heartwarming to receive such a welcome. I've enjoyed a warm welcome everywhere I've been in Colorado, but that is not always the case. I do not always get a warm welcome from my people. And when I say my people, I mean the Negro race. They feel as though I've made some poor decisions. They've judged me for the way I've lived my life. They just assume that I'm not a Christian. And that's important to many people, but I do believe in God. I pray before every performance. I pray every night before I go to bed. They also make assumptions that I put on airs, that I consider myself too good since I live in France and speak in French to be identified with the American Negro. That is not true. It is true that I have French citizenship and I do not have American citizenship anymore. But that was not by choice. It was by American law. You see, if you are an American woman and you marry a foreign man, then you automatically are stripped of your American citizenship. But an American man can marry a foreign woman. He does not lose his American citizenship, and his foreign wife automatically gains American citizenship. Well, I must admit, I've married two Frenchmen, not at the same time, but in 1937 I married Jean Leon, and I lost my American citizenship. But I am American. I was born in 1906 in St. Louis, Missouri, and my mother gave me a nickname that people from that time still call me. My nickname was Tumpy. She saw me and named me Tumpy right away. It's something to do with Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. I guess when she saw me, she thought I looked like a cracked egg. But we were poor. My mother was a laundress, and my father was, well, if I am to be honest with you, and I do try to be honest. I do not know who my father was. Now, that was a secret that my mother kept to her grave. But we were poor, and eventually she married a man, Arthur Martin, and had 3 more children by him, and he was a good man. He treated us well, and he put up with my mother. But my mother, I feel as though she did not want to take care of me when I was her firstborn child. As soon as I was old enough, she hired me out to white people to work for them. It was really like being a slave in reality. I would eventually displease my employers, and they would send me back home to her. And then I was old enough to help her with these other babies that were coming along. I worked for her in the laundry, going out and delivering and collecting payments. I would go into white neighborhoods and get little odd jobs for which I get a dime or maybe 25 cents. It was not a very pleasant life. I rarely went to school. I worked for her or other people. But I could escape that reality when I went to the Booker Washington Theater at 23rd and Market. It was our theater. And I could see and hear the biggest stars at our theater. I would go there in the afternoons if I had a chance and watch rehearsals. And I would spend my money to go and maybe bring my younger siblings to the matinees. That was where I wanted to live. And I memorized everything I saw on stage. I knew all the lines, all the dances, every step, all the jokes. I could do all the funny faces across my eyes, and do the chicken walk, and of course, do the dancing. It was not very refined dancing, but it entertained the audience. My audience, my siblings, and the other children in my neighborhood. But I was faithful to whoever was performing at the Washington Theater. It was my escape from reality. And reality could be pretty brutal. I was 11 years old when just across the river in East St. Louis, Illinois, there were race riots. I don't know how they began or why they began, but for 3 days, white people attacked whatever colored person they saw on the street. Men were dragging colored men off of the trolley cars and the buses and beating them to within an inch of their lives. White women and children were carrying bats and all kinds of hose and things with which they could beat people on the street. And at night, they would set fire to the houses. A lot of people in East St. Louis, in the Negro neighborhood, lived in boxcars. You know you don't have much if you're living in a boxcar. They would set fire to the homes and to the boxcars, and then as people ran out of the fires to save their lives, there were men waiting there with guns to mow them down. Now the policemen were there, but they did not help us. I remember those riots vividly as if I experienced them personally. It's only recently that I realized that no, I was just 10, 11 years old, and I could hear the sounds, I could see the fires across the river. But we were on the Missouri side, and people were running across East Bridge to get to us and swimming across the river when the police closed down the bridge. And we took those families in, whatever refugees might have made it out of East St. Louis, and I heard those stories, it left a scar on me that I still carry to this day. No, I knew that reality could be a brutal, vicious thing. But that wasn't so when I was sitting in a seat at the Washington Theater. And so, one evening, when I overheard them talking about the troupe going on with its tour to Memphis, Tennessee, I asked the producer, Mr. Russell, if he would hire me and I could come along. I wasn't good enough to be in the chorus, but the headliner, Clara Smith, liked me, and she had Mr. Russell hire me as her dresser and companion. And so I went with them. Only the clothes on my back. I was 13 years old, and my career in show business had begun. Yes, I had stepped into that alternate reality, but it was not as lovely as I dreamed it would be. It was hard being on the road. The producers and the theater owners all controlled us. They were all members of an organization that was called the TOBA, or the T-O-B-A circuit. T-O-B-A, that was Theater Owners Booking Association. But all of us who performed knew that it really stood for tough on black asses. It was not easy traveling. We did not always travel in comfortable style. We did not always have places to stay. Eating was hit or miss. Getting paid was hit or miss. But I was in show business because eventually I got my chance to be in the chorus. Oh, I continued to memorize everything that was happening on stage. So when some young chorus girl got too sick to go on, and believe me, you have to be really sick in the TOBA circuit if you're not going to go on. I went on in her place. And there I was on stage doing what I was supposed to be doing. And as we exited, I couldn't resist. I started doing the things I love, like closing my eyes and dancing crazy. And the audience loved it. And Mr. Russell, thank goodness, he loved it too. And so I was not a part of the regular chorus. I was too big and too brown. They wanted small, delicate Negro girls who looked white. But I was tacked on at the end as the comic chorus girl. And eventually, I worked my way up until I was a featured comedian in Sissel and Blake's Shuffle Along. Shuffle Along. That was the first Negro hit on Broadway. It was written, directed, produced, performed by all Negro dancers, singers, comedians. And it was a Broadway hit. It ran in New York for over a year and toured the country. 6 years after I left home, I was a featured performer in New York. And that's when Caroline Dudley Reagan came to my rescue. You see, she was married to an American diplomat working in France. And it was the 1920s. And the French had gone crazy for anything African. It was exotic to them, and they loved it. Le jazz hot, the Charleston, and ragtime. And Caroline decided that her project was to be going back to New York, putting together a show, and taking it to Paris, France. And when she came to New York, she saw me and she chose me to be the star of her show. La Revue Nègre, the Negro Review. And she found all the best musicians and dancers, and we worked on the show in New York, and then we got on a boat and went to Paris, France. And any misgivings we had about taking our show to a foreign country where we did not even speak the language, well, they just flew out the window the moment we stepped off the boat. We could walk down the street without fear. We could stay in any hotel. We could eat at any restaurant. We could go shopping in any store and try on the clothes. We thought we were in heaven. And this was before the show even opened. They loved us. They embraced us as if we were already their own. Well, the opening was nearly a disaster, and that was my fault. You see, the night before the opening, I straightened my hair. I did the usual thing of putting chemicals in. You leave them in for a certain amount of time, and then you wash it out, and then your hair is straight, and you can style it as you want to. Well, I put the chemicals in and fell asleep. I woke up a few hours later, screaming in agony. My head was burning. My scalp, I couldn't stop it. I just wanted to cut my head off. I wanted to run to a window and jump out, and some other cast member stopped me and brought me back and washed my head and calmed me down. And then they called Caroline. And Caroline came in and took one look at me and gathered me up and took me to her personal hairdresser, Antoine. And Antoine looked at me and said, "There's nothing I can do. There's not a hair left." But then he had an idea. He got some black paint and painted her hair onto my scalp so that it looked like I had a very short cut and my face was framed with little spit curls. And then he got some lacquer and put 3 coats of lacquer onto my scalp, my painted scalp. And I went on that night with that as my hairdo. The first time anyone in France had seen me on stage, and it became my signature hairdo. And they loved the show. And the show ran to sold-out audiences for weeks and weeks, and every night after the show, my room was filled with new friends and admirers, and they would take me out to dinner after the show, and then we'd wander into some little cabaret where there was another audience waiting. And so I would get up and sing and dance until the wee hours of the morning. We'd eat breakfast, and I'd make it back to my room at about 10 o'clock in the morning, where I would go to sleep and then get up in time to do the show that night, and then go out to cabarets all night. Oh, this went on day in, day out for weeks. But you must remember that I was only 19 years old. I could do it then. And then the show went on to Berlin, where we had the same incredible reception. But I left the show after Berlin because Monsieur Paul Deval, a big producer impresario, had followed me to Berlin. He came into my dressing room one night and said, "Josephine, I would like you to be the star of my next show." The Folie Bergère! How could I say no? Goodbye, La Revue. Bonjour, Folie Bergère. And there, I went on, of course, with my signature hairdo and did all of my wild and crazy dancing with all of my faces in what became a signature dance for me, my banana skirt dance. I came on stage and danced, some people thought scandalously, in nothing but a necklace and a skirt of fake bananas all around my hips. And if I thought I'd been popular over La Péjunée, this sent Paris over the top. All sorts of aristocrats and dignitaries, military, government people, they were all at my beck and call every night in my dressing room. I had tons of friends and lovers, and my favorite was Pepito. His real name is Count Giuseppe Aventino, but I called him Pepito. And he took over my heart, my life, and my career. He said, Josephine, no more. No more of this buffoonery you do on stage, scantily clad. No, you are going to change. You are going to become a grande dame du théâtre, a grand lady of the theater. He hired a countess to teach me proper French and English, and taught me how to write. I got a voice teacher so that I learned something about how to sing. She also taught me which fork to use at those fancy dinners that I was always being invited to, and how to make pleasant social conversation with the upper classes of Europe. He changed, of course, what I wore on stage to gorgeous, elegant gowns made by the Paris Salon of Haute Couture. I was wearing Dior, Balenciaga, and I had a completely different act. So, Pepito arranged a tour of 27 countries around the world. And when I returned to Paris, I was an international star. And then Pepito said, we have another continent to conquer. Our next tour will be in the United States. Of course, I wanted to do that, to go home as a success. Yes, Pepito arranged for me to be a co-star at the Ziegfeld Follies. Everyone understood that Fanny Brice was the star. But when we got there and saw the posters, it said Ziegfeld Follies starring Fanny Brice, and my name was in smaller letters. Under Fanny Brice it said, with Bob Hope and Josephine Baker. Third billing. When we arrived in New York, I went to the Hotel Waldorf Astoria with Pepito. He went in as I was, looking over, making sure that all 70 of my Vuitton suitcases were being carried properly into the hotel. Well, it was fine when they saw Pepito, and they told him he could stay there, but that I could not. We went to a total of 9 fancy hotels in Manhattan, and none of them would accept me. I stayed with a friend, Mickey Sawada, that night at her apartment, and the next day I found accommodations at a modest place in Harlem. I went to the rehearsals, planning to work the way I had worked in every other country in the world, a collaboration between the producer and myself. Most of my suitcases were filled with those elegant gowns that I wore on stage, my costumes. Well, that wasn't the way things worked at the Ziegfeld Follies. I had to do what they told me to do and wear what they told me to wear. And they wanted me to do the banana skirt dance again and costumed me in a bra, which I understood. This was the United States. They were not going to have topless dancers in 1930 there. But there were metallic cones sticking out from the bra, and the bananas were similar spiky things. It was ugly, atrocious. I felt it. I did look hideous in it. And I was a flop. The show might have been wonderful, but I drew terrible reviews. I could not wait to get back to Paris. And I did not come to the United States again for 20 years. By then I had a new agent, and he had arranged for me to open at the Copa City Club in Miami. Ned Schuyler owned that club. And when we met to discuss the contract and the terms, I said, of course, my people will be there in the audience. And he laughed and said, oh, Josephine, this is the United States and the South. No Negro has ever entered the Copa City Club as a customer. No, they've never dined here, never been in the audience. Well, we argued and argued until he finally agreed, because I said, I will not work any place where my people cannot come. So he agreed, thinking that no Negroes would come where they had never been before. Well, they came. And the white folks came too, and they all sat together. It was not segregated in any way, and everyone had a great time. And Ned fell in love with what I did on stage, so he took over the tour, and it was clear that I was not going to perform anywhere where Negroes could not be seated freely in the audience. And finally, he drew attention from my people, and I became a hero of sorts. Why, even Harlem had a Josephine Baker Day in May in 1951, and they finally accepted me. And I was speaking out because I had lived not only in France, but all over the world, and knew that there we were in the 1950s, and the United States had not made any progress in race relations. And after the US tour, I toured the rest of the world and did as I always did, interviews, going out visiting hospitals and orphanages, doing benefits for various organizations. And I told them the truth. I told them what I saw in the 1950s in race relations in our country. And our government wanted to shut me up. But they couldn't do anything like taking away my passport or throwing me in jail because I was not an American citizen. But the diplomatic corps did its best to throw its weight around. I had several tours that were canceled. I remember on my way to Mexico from Paris, I had to stop over at the airport in New York, and they harassed me there for 4 hours. They held me up, grilled me with all sorts of questions, and then let me go without an apology or an explanation. Walter Winchell had contacted, J. Edgar Hoover, because Senator McCarthy was doing all that fear-mongering with the about communism with the House Committee on Un-American Activities. They said, oh, this Josephine Baker, she has a lot of communist friends. Well, of course I had communist friends. I don't judge people by their political affiliations. But me, a communist? have you seen how they dress in Moscow? No. I would never be a communist. J. Edgar Hoover found nothing on me. And so, I finally, after 20 years of feeling an outcast, was accepted as an activist for my people from the United States. The highest honor, the most magical moment for me, was getting to speak in 1963 at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I was the only woman to speak there at that gathering. And I wore my French uniform. I was a lieutenant in the French resistance. I had been given by France the Resistance Medal and the Cross of War and I was made a knight, a chevalier de Légion d'honneur of the Legion of Honor. 3 great honors bestowed on me because I fought for our side and I served as a spy for the French and for the Allies, of course. And I appeared at the March on Washington in my uniform, not because I wanted to flaunt the fact that I was a French citizen, but that I was more than just a singer and an entertainer. I have hope for this country. I have hope for the world. And I've tried to demonstrate it by proving that people from different racial backgrounds and religious and ethnic backgrounds can live together in harmony. I have adopted, well, Joe Bouillon, my husband at that time, agreed with me to adopt 4 children, 4 boys, a white baby, a brown baby, a yellow, and a red baby. And so we announced it to the world, to the press, the French press, and my friend Becky, who was in Japan, said, Josephine, I see you want to adopt a yellow baby, and you're coming on tour here, and I have an orphanage here after losing World War II. Please, I'm sure you can find an orphan here. So I did the tour in Japan, and Joe, he met me at the airport, and I stepped off the airplane holding 2 Japanese boys. And he said, which one is ours, Josephine? And I said, both. He was livid. Already, Josephine, you've gone over our limit. He is such a sweet man. He adopted them both and the 10 others that followed. I call them my tribu d'Arc-en-Ciel, my rainbow tribe. And I've raised them and they belong in my chateau for the world to see that it can happen. And I still have the dream of having a university of brotherhood. I do all this not only out of hope, but in the hope of healing this conflict in my heart between being American and being French. I have a signature song that friends wrote for me just about this terrible conflict that I have. They call it J'ai 2 amours. I have 2 loves. Mon pays, my country here, et Paris, France. And I love ma savane, my country, but I cannot deny that I love all of Paris as well. The people who accepted me when my own country rejected me. I would like to sing a little bit of it for you as I close. J'ai 2 amours. J'ai 2 amours. Mon pays est Paris. Parle toujours. Mon cœur est ravi. Ma savane est belle. Mais à quoi bon le nier? Ce qui m'ensorcelle, c'est Paris tout entier. Je vois un jour, c'est mon rêve joli. J'ai 2 amours, mon pays est Paris. Mon pays est Paris. Thank you for listening. As I said before, I will try to be honest and answer them to the best of my ability. Yes.
Now, how could you, with such a high worldwide profile, be a spy and hide anything?
That is a good question. He asked, how could I, with such a high profile, be a spy? And that was precisely my cover. That I was so well known and so loved in Europe and North Africa, well, the world really, but that was my area of operation, that people didn't suspect me. I knew I was friends with Mussolini long before the war broke out. I was hobnobbing with all sorts of eventually Nazi officers who we were dying together. Hitler would never lower himself to die with me, a Negro performer. But many of his officers, his generals did. I was known, and so I made no bones about trying to hide anything, and I would write information that the Allies needed, tuck them into my underclothes, use invisible ink and write down the information on my sheet music. I was still performing throughout the world at that time, and they would not dare. You know, in America they might, but the rest of the world they would not dare to examine me or go through my things. And I also made it very clear as the war progressed and France caved and the whole Vichy government and that whole thing, I made it very clear that I was anti-Nazi. I was just out there, out front, and it was the cover that they decided, the French spies and the English government decided that that was the cover they needed. So information would come to us. I had free passage to Portugal where I was performing, and the English had people in Portugal in ways of getting the information back to England that Churchill needed and that de Gaulle, who was in London, needed as well. So yes, I was able to serve as a spy. And I became terribly ill, and then my hospital room was a meeting place for the agents, because no one would suspect that that kind of thing was going on in my hospital room. So yes, I was able to serve even though I was sick.
Thank you.
Yes.
How many of your children are still alive?
Oh, he asks, how many of my children are still alive? And it is 1965, and they're all alive, and they're all in school, and you know, you can ask someone who will be here later. I'm sure she'll get back to that question.
How
Yes.
much contact did you have with your siblings after you went to Europe?
How much contact did I have with my siblings after I went to Europe? I had quite a bit. I did have a younger sister who died before I could bring everyone over to France to live in my chateau of Les Milan. But I brought my mother over. The next one in line was Richard, the next youngest, and he came over and ended up marrying a French woman. And Margaret, who we called Marguerite, and that was before France was a part of my life. They live with me now. Yes.
Who would you say, male or female, who was the love of your life?
After me. Who was the love of my life? That would be hard to say at this point. I've had many loves, and I really consider that any man I've ever loved to be my husband. So they were very intimate relationships. But certainly Pepito, he changed my life and gave it a direction that I follow to this day. You wanted to ask another question?
Sure. Your movie experience, what was the movie?
My movie experience. I could stand in front of these speakers and speak. The sound man told me I wouldn't be able to do that. So he wanted to know about my movie experience. In the late 20s, I made 3 French films, and they were not successful. But I loved making them, and I think there were many fans who enjoyed them as well. But I have to be honest and say that they weren't successful. I was working on a 4th movie in the late 30s. The producers came to me and they wanted me to do another film, but World War II cut off that production. But these movies, I did get to sing and dance in the movies, but they were not the show business movies. You know, let's get together and make a show and save the school that, you know, needs the money or something like that. They had a plot line that I helped develop, and but they didn't work out very well.
I have a question.
I just heard someone over here, but I saw this hand here. So 1 and then 2?
Why didn't you have your own children?
Oh. She asked why I wasn't able to have children. And I spent a lot of my life going to doctors trying to get an answer to that question. But it seems that there was a congenital defect in my uterus I couldn't carry. They didn't think I could carry. And I never got pregnant, ever. So, but this question at the I missed one because of the sound. Yes.
Did you ever get your citizenship?
Oh. I am not. It is 1965, and by law, I am not an American citizen. Perhaps the next person can answer that. Yes, I hope I'm not leaving out people in other sections, but yes.
Are you able to show us any bit of a routine from a dance? Are you able to do that with those shoes?
Oh, she asked if I'm able to show you a routine of a dance. And again, I'm going to defer to the next person. I cannot do them especially in this dress, I'm afraid I would tear. Yes, and next to you,
You've lived such a phenomenal life, and that, has there ever been a movie or a documentary made about Josephine Baker's life?
at this point, no.
Fabulous.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yes? Oh, one more, who said one more? One more?
Yes.
Okay, this will be it.
One should a PBS special about your life.
Yes. Is that coming broadcasting? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think so. So,
Yeah, let's open it up, thank you.
yes, and where's that water? I'm gonna get a sip of water, thank you.
And I think you can probably answer a few of those earlier questions.
And, Josephine has come into her own, and there are PBS, I have not seen the PBS special. And there's also a film that has already been made and released on her, and I can't remember her name, Monet? There was a woman who has, the movie's in the can, they haven't released it, Josephine Baker's life. And it's a young, strikingly beautiful actress. She's in the most recent Knives Out movie, who will be playing Josephine Baker. And from seeing her in that Knives Out, I think she will physically be a great Josephine. I think the movie that, for some reason, I'm thinking Angela Bassett has done. Who's Halle Berry? Oh, okay. All right then. But she is so colorful and so fabulous that, yes, there have been films and documentaries made on her. Yes.
So when did you decide that you wanted to play this role?
Oh, I was asked to play this role. I had seen other Chautauquans do her, and when someone called and asked if I would do her, I said, let me send you to these other people I know. And about a month later, they came back. I did not ask why, but they said, do you think you can get her ready? And I took it on.
How long were you playing this role?
The difficulty about researching Josephine Baker, and it'll be interesting to look at these films, is that I had a lot of trouble finding books that were written in English that were supported by good scholarship. She was known for making up stories. She really, I don't think she ever would have said that she was not in the East St. Louis race riots. Most books that you read about her in interviews say that she said she was there, that she lived in a boxcar, and they set fire to it. And she ran out the back with her mother. She came up with all sorts of stories. And she would come up with conflicting stories in interviews. And most of the books, biographies about her in French, and some translated into English, have conflicting stories in them. The most reliable book I found is called A Hungry Heart, and it's written by Jean-Claude Baker. And Jean-Claude, I guess is how you would say it in French. But he was her 13th adopted child, and she met him when he was 14, and he was a porter at a hotel where she was staying, and both her version and his version of the story says that she heard his life story. He had a poor single mother. They were friends, Josephine and his mother, And so really, as a young adult and an adult, he had a child's relationship. He was an adopted son. And he wrote this book over many years. You look at the back of the book and all the articles, the bibliography is extensive. But it's written in the style of mother addressing Josephine. Mother, you told me la-di-da-di-da-di-da. But when I talked to your brother and your sister about it, they said something different. And so I feel as though his was the reliable book. And just recently, Damian Lewis was able to publish a book about her spy experience. There are a lot of books in French, but I couldn't read them and they weren't translated. Yes, any other, oh. Are the children still alive? Okay. When I first started to research Josephine a year or so ago, yes, they were all alive and they were all, had families and careers and they didn't have any attention from the public. They were just living their lives. Her husband who adopted them, they separated before they divorced. He went to Argentina, and many of the children went to Argentina as they grew into adulthood. When she died, she died in '75, and when she died, many of them were over there. There were only 2 or 3, and I can't remember which ones were still close to her. And those 12 see Jean-Claude Becker, because she adopted him, and he has, her last name is 13th child. They see him as a sibling, and he cared for them, and he would, when there was a crisis, and there were many crises. Josephine did not have any economic sense or how to stick to a budget, and eventually she lost her chateau. After being rescued dramatically from losing it many times, she finally lost it in '68. And she would, every time she spent all the money, she would go on tour again and have another farewell tour. and he sold out. Even people said, oh, she's so old, she's washed up. I think film probably does not do her justice. Over and over again, you read in many books and interviews of people who saw her perform that it was magic if you saw her in person. And so her farewell tours were always sold out. She must have been remarkable to see on stage. She did continue to dance. Someone had a question about the dancing, and you can see her dance on a lot of little films. There are a lot of little clips that are on YouTube, on the internet. Her dancing is not what we think of a dance. She's not a trained dancer. She would watch what people do and did her best to do it. She even danced on toe. She's done opera, ballets, just from watching and teaching herself. But the kind of dancing she did that made her famous and popular, it was just like a series of wide, real weird kind of poses, going from pose to pose to pose really fast, and then sometimes, shaking her hips and, doing comic things. But, it was, any dancer would look at that and go, but people loved it. They ate it up. And I just can't do it. He's 13. She adopted him.
Was that written in French?
No, it's in English. And it's co-written with another woman. And I did not bring my book down here because that's the one I carry with me because I can double check facts.
Do you recall the title?
The Hungry Heart, and the subtitle is something about Josephine Baker's in the name. And his name is Jean-Claude Baker, and it is co-written with another person, a woman.
I just want to share too, for what it's worth, I mean, these obviously don't do justice either, but there are a lot of beautiful children's books that have come out in the last maybe 5 years about her.
Yes.
They're beautiful art, beautiful.
And I have seen several, I'm sure I haven't seen them all. But, yeah, she did remarkable things. And, you know, it was the roaring 20s, it was a new age for women, and she took flying lessons and could fly all around Paris. She never transported herself on her tours, but she got a license and flew a plane. She learned to drive. I don't know if anyone really taught her, but there are several stories of her getting. One story had it in an accident, but most of the stories had it that she was in a traffic jam, and she just got out of her car, gave the keys to the policeman, and walked away. And they would be like, "Josephine Baker, she gave me the keys." You know, it was just, they all knew her doctor. And I read that even today in France, they talk about Josephine. They are talking about Napoleon's wife, Josephine, or it's Josephine Baker. That's it. And when I went to consult some French nationals who were living in Asheville to prepare for this presentation, the wife was giving me all the information. My husband was standing there listening like this, and when we finished our conversation, he said, "You know, if you say Josephine in France, we all know you're either talking about Josephine the Empress or Josephine Baker." I knew he was going to say that, but I didn't tell him that I knew he was going to say that. The French in 2021, in the fall of 2021, that's a little more than a year ago, right? Installed her in the Pantheon, which is the highest honor that any French person can have. And, you know, they had to have a petition and signatures, and it had to go to the legislature, whatever their legislature is, and it had to be passed. And she is not buried there. People like Rabelais and, you know, other Molière, they're all buried there, and a lot of political people, I don't know, Madame Curie, who you may know, is buried there. But you have the choice. The descendants can either give permission to put the remains in the Pantheon or to just have a plaque in the Pantheon. And they chose to have her remains stay with. She is buried in Monaco because Princess Grace of Monaco was one of the people who befriended her when she was losing her chateau. And Princess Grace had a second funeral. She thought that the funeral in Paris was just a show and just too ugly and show busy and glitzy. So she had a more somber, you know, what she felt was an appropriate funeral for Josephine in Monaco. And she had given Josephine a place to live in Monaco with her children that chose to live with her. So Josephine is still there. Her husband, Josephine, is buried, her former husband, Josephine is buried there. And, you know, as far as I know, that's where they're going to stay, and I guess the children can be buried there if they so choose. So Josephine has been inducted into the Pantheon, but her remains are not there. Were there some other questions that I deferred to the scholar?
Here.
Oh, yes. Where? There.
I'm over there.
Oh, everybody's playing. Someone speak. Yes.
It seems like you've gotten to know her quite well. Has she changed any of your views on life?
Oh, I'm sorry. It seemed that I
said it seems like you've gotten to know her very well. Has it changed any of your views on life?
Oh, it's changed. I seem to have gotten to know Josephine well, and has it changed my views on life? Yes, certainly. I think I'm affected by all the characters that I've done, but Josephine just really convinced me that you have to go for what you hope for and what you dream for, and not worry about what people think. I don't think she had a real touch with reality. But, she just saw no boundaries and just went for things. She's exciting to study. Yes?
This is the third time I've seen you perform at Chautauqua. You are extremely knowledgeable, phenomenally talented.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, goodness. Was played Josephine?
Yes.
Oh, I
It was
don't
an
know.
HBO movie. I saw it when I was a kid, and that character stayed with me for ever since I saw it. I think it was from the 80s.
Great. Okay, I'll look for that.
Yeah, I remember the banana skirts.
Yes, how can anyone forget the banana skirts? Well, if there aren't any other comments? Oh, I
Was
see a
Josephine
hand.
ever in any danger being a spy?
Was she ever in any danger? Yes. I feel so pathetic because I get confused like in James Bond movies and spy movies. And I was kind of confused reading the book, even though I could go back and double check. But Damian Lewis is the author, and he cites two examples where Jacques Abte, who was her mentor and her lover, and who guided her through her spy experience, he was not present at Les Milandes when she was there alone and Nazis came to the door. And they felt that she was terribly at risk then. But she made it through. She said, I do not want you here, but I cannot help but offer you, as a proper lady would, offer you some tea or coffee or something like that or whatever. But, they looked around and they didn't find anything. Things were well hidden. And I can't quite remember the second one, but that was later. And of course, the whole time they were meeting in her hospital room, she needed to be hospitalized. She had so many surgeries. It was hard to keep track of all the diseases they were trying to keep. But she joked, why don't you just, insert a zipper so that it'll be simpler to get in and monkey around with her insides. She was just sick all the time and very vulnerable. She was in Casablanca in the hospital, and there were times when they thought, ooh, the Nazis are getting awful close. But and they wouldn't have been able to help her. She couldn't move. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you all again for joining us this evening, and just thank you so much for such a great presentation and kicking off. Our Chautauqua is coming back in person, so again, luckily I'm loud. It's just again, we have cookies and some refreshments in the back, so on your way out, feel free to grab something along with some of our marketing materials to show some of the other great programs that we have going on throughout this month and then also next month. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great evening.